2 months ago, I had to move offices. I found a newspaper that was 64 years old. I then dug out two 1960 letters my mom had saved. These were 1960. September 1960 was the first televised debate between presidential candidates. And we have a presidential candidate debate coming up this evening in 45 minutes. It was also when I transferred as a junior from Worcester to Harvard. I had liked Worcester, but friends at Harvard thought I should experience that too. So I was coming back east, where my mom's distant ancestors came from, although I had never been to New York until after my freshman year at Worcester, and never to New England until I interviewed at Harvard. This was election eve in 1960. I'm going to read to you from the letters my mom saved and show you the newspaper clipping. First, a little background. I was raised Republican in Western Ohio. In 1828, my father's widowed great-grandmother, Sarah Buck McBride, had brought her children, 4 children aged 3 months to 12 years, from South Carolina to Morning Sun, Ohio, a community that was devoted to emancipation and the Underground Railway. My mother's great-great-grandfather, Charles Post, first Republican delegate to Ohio's General Assembly, was reportedly marked for assassination by Knights of the Golden Circle. During the Civil War, he went to get the Republican Cincinnati Gazette. The postmaster offered him instead the Democratic Cincinnati Enquirer. He was eager to get the war news, but he waved it aside, saying, "It stinketh in my nostrils." I was in Defiance, Ohio, October 15, 1953. Together with these Troop 13 comrades, I held my flag and a camera in the other hand to take a picture as Ike's motorcade passed by. Here's a tweet from the presidential historian Michael McBride. The tweet was in November 7, 2016. And he said, "This is JFK's last presidential campaign rally in Boston Garden tonight, that is November 7th, in 1960. 2 months before that, I had showed up at Harvard. Borden and Ethan, friends from home, had talked me into transferring. Borden's roommate, Bill, a Democratic activist, had landed himself a ticket for the Garden. He went early in mid-afternoon to get a balcony seat. I had already voted absentee for Nixon Lodge. After dinner, the Republican activist Dick Durham invited Borden and me to come along to Back Bay to hear Henry Cabot Lodge. So we got on the MTA, went to Park Street and out to Back Bay to hear Lodge. But he didn't show. So back on the MTA, and Durham went back to Cambridge, but Borden and I decided to go see the action at Boston Garden. What we didn't know is that Kennedy had arrived in the afternoon and gone to the Statler Hilton Hotel, and was, at the same time we were going, in a motorcade on his way. There were 1 million people that lined the roads to welcome him, so it was slow. It took 1 hour to go 1.4 miles. So we were waiting outside the Boston Garden, which normally looked like this, but looked like this that night. As I wrote home, the crowd got tighter and tighter and became the worst I've ever seen. Women went hysterical as the crowd picked you up off your feet and swept you this way and that. This is the only time I was ever in a crowd where I was actually picked up off my feet by pressure from the neighbors. Policemen weren't able to keep a path open, so when the cars and motorcycles came through, people got their toes run over and swarmed all over everything. Borden and I were still watching when a friend said he had passed already, and sure enough, there he was, 75 feet past us. We figured the easiest way to get out of the crowd was to follow the cars in the parade. So here's a map from the letter, and it should be turned this way to show the Boston Garden in the background. So the motorcade went this way, and we had been standing here but followed in its wake. So when it got to the Boston Garden, it turned left and we followed. And here's the next map from the letter showing where the Kennedy car went around the side to a ramp, because parking at the inside the Boston Garden under the stands is on the second floor because it's above North Station. So we followed in the wake, got to the ramp while the car went up. We wanted to get up on the ramp to see if we could see Kennedy, but there was a police line fighting people off. So we went under the ramp and up the scaffold on the other side and followed the car in. Now inside in this parking area, there were 2 rows of a band, and the car drove between them, but we skirted around the outside. When we got to this point, the head policeman told his men to let no one else pass, and they caught Borden, but somehow I got through. And was only about 8 feet from the car as Kennedy got out on the other side and went through a door. So he went into some sort of green room to get ready to recover from this journey. And they closed the garage door. So I was here in a big crowd, and I couldn't get out because of the garage door being closed. So I started talking with a girl from Boston College and her date from University of Massachusetts Amherst. We looked through and could see through the passageway and could see the commotion in the arena beyond. So we walked over to get a better view as 2 police lines formed. We were standing right next to the door behind the police line, watching press people and famous people like Kennedy's sisters, Peter Lawford, state Democratic candidates, and so on, walk in front of us, and we were trying to figure out how we could get in. We finally figured out that Kennedy would probably pass in front of us, and maybe we could push forward on the police and slip into the garden to the right in the commotion when he came past. 2 months ago, I Googled JFK Boston Garden 1960. This was the first thing that came up from the JFK library. Let's go back and replay this and focus your attention over here on the left. Here is yours truly. And watch as he sneaks in around the corner. So the others got in too, and we were patting each other on the back as we were swept 75 feet into the arena. You can see on the bottom here our path. Meanwhile, Kennedy had mounted the platform up the stairs, and the place was an utter bedlam for 15 minutes. I really never heard so much cheering in my life. We were standing among lots of people with member of the official party on their lapel, press, and so on.
And I want to make it clear that while I may downgrade the leadership we are promised for the future and the leadership we have had in the past, I have traveled this country from one end to another. I have spent many days in nearly every state, and I come back to Boston, Massachusetts, with a stronger feeling of confidence, of hope, of knowledge of the vitality and energy of this society and our people than I could have ever had before. It is the best education for a candidate for the presidency. All the criticisms that are leveled at presidential campaigns, in my judgment, fade away against the knowledge which a potential president may have of the strength of this society of ours and its people. So I come here tonight. I thank you for your past support. I ask you to join us tomorrow. And most of all, I ask you to join us if we are successful. I ask you to join us in all the tomorrows yet to come, in building America, moving America, picking this country of ours up and sending it into the 60s.
So he took his bows. We were right at the corner of the platform where some loudspeakers were mounted on two tables, half as high as the platform that was about 5 feet high. The fellow put his date on one of the tables, and we tried to persuade her to get up on the platform, but she wouldn't. So I got up on the other one, then up on the platform and pulled her up. Then we both pulled the fellow up. We couldn't see Kennedy for all the cops and VIPs, but I figured if I could make it over toward the stairs, I might spot him. I got around several police to within 10 feet of the stairs, walking along the edge of the platform. I was really teetering along the edge of the platform because the crowd was so thick and there was no rail. I got around outside one last cop, but there was a fellow walking shoulder to shoulder to me who, in the crowd, was almost bumping me off. So here's what Kennedy was doing. And here are two other guys near Kennedy. What do you think they are? Security. Watch how they handle the guy in the white coat. The white-haired guy gets between them, and number one hustles him off. So here are our newest friends again. Security 2, Security 1, and white coat still trying to get there. But here are my older friends, the Boston College student and the UMass student, hoping to get a handshake. And here's the naive new Harvard student looking for Kennedy, and then teetering along the edge of the stage. He still hasn't seen Kennedy, but he's worried about somebody pushing him off the stage, namely Kennedy. But finally, he smiles at his new friends. Account in a second letter home, written 10 days later. I promptly forgot their names, those two students. But the day before yesterday, I got a letter from UMass Amherst addressed simply Mike McBride, Harvard University, No surprise it took 10 days to get to me. I opened it up and found a note saying the writer hoped it would make it to a staunch Republican, and a newspaper clipping. And this was the newspaper clipping from the next day, November 8th. And I went down to the Boston Globe offices and got a print of it. So here you see Kennedy in the middle, and look at his right arm, and my right arm. And you can see my fingertips as I'm shaking his hand. Now in the crowd, you can pick out Pat Lawford and Peter Lawford behind her, and Eunice Kennedy Shriver behind Kennedy, and Tip O'Neill. And next to Kennedy, between us, you see the security, number 1 and number 2. Number 2 is looking down at us, shaking hands, but he's not looking at my left hand, which is covered in a coat and could have anything. These were naive days. I'm happy to have the picture, but I wish the Boston Globe photographer had flipped the camera 0.2 of a second later, because he would have seen Kennedy looking at me. But I'm happy with the picture as it is. For one thing, the photo provided the theme the alumni of my research group used in making mugs to celebrate my retirement. So I was coming back east. 4 years later, I stuffed envelopes for Johnson and Humphrey against Goldwater and Miller. As the Republican Party began moving away from its roots and from my family. This is where I came from, in western Ohio, in Lima, where Charles Post, my mother's ancestor, was anti-slavery Republican state representative in 1856. And down here is where anti-slavery Sarah McBride brought her children from South Carolina in 1828. And these spanned the 4th Congressional District. Now, the 4th District has had a Republican U.S. representative since 1938. At the time I was growing up, it was William McCulloch, who was called by Lyndon Johnson the most important and powerful political force in passing the 1964 Civil Rights Act. McCulloch also supported strong gun control legislation and busing in 1968. But in 2011 and 21, the district had changed. It's now represented by Jim Jordan, the founding chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. So what do I do now? As we're about to hear the first presidential debate of the 2024 season, I hope and I intend to vote. Thank you.